In 1860, Abraham Lincoln won the presidential election in an electoral college landslide. Afterwards, 11 slave states seceded from the Union to join a new government, the Confederate States of America. Soon after, in April, the Confederates shot their first shots at Fort Sumter, to which many Confederates thought Lincoln would just let it go and sign a peace deal. What actually happened was the deadliest war on American soil. Even though the Confederates were outnumbered in both industry and population, they had a strong military tradition and some of the greatest tacticians of their time. In 1861, the first battle would occur, called the First Battle of Bull Run. 35,000 Confederates would hold off Union troops from taking the city of Manassas, and in the process push both sides to start asking for more recruits, as they got their first taste of how bloody the war would end up being. Also, George B. McClellan would replace Winfield Scott as the supreme commander of the Union forces after this catastrophe. McClellan, although loved by his forces, was very cautious and would not do anything else for the rest of the year. Finally, in the spring of 1862, McClellan would take his army of the Potomac onto a peninsula between the York and James River. Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson were able to push him back, though, which ended McClellan's offensive for the time being. Lee would split his forces, sending Jackson north to fight John Pope at the Second Battle of Bull Run for control of Manassas, and Lee would chase McClellan into Maryland. Lee would lose a battle and then be forced into a defensive at Antietam Creek as dawn broke on the 17th of September. Both sides broke down into battle, with McClellan on one side and Lee reinforced with Jackson on the other. This would be the single bloodiest day in American history. After the Battle of Antietam, Lincoln would take his victory as the time to declare the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared all slaves in the rebelling states as free in the eyes of the Union. Sadly, a few pockets still existed in states like Maryland, who the Emancipation Proclamation had not applied to, seeing as they had not rebelled. Soon in the spring of 1863, Lee would fight Hooker at the Battle of Chancellorsville, and then fight General Meade at the Battle of Gettysburg soon after. Meade would be able to hold off Lee and win the most famous battle of the American Civil War, but Meade's counterattack would fail, so Lee was successfully able to retreat into Virginia. The same month, Vicksburg would fall to the future President Ulysses S. Grant. This put the mighty Mississippi in Union's control and severed the Confederates in two. Grant would also go fight and win the Battle of Chattanooga soon after, and finally in 1864, Grant would be put in control of the army in the east. After a few battles with heavy casualties, Grant would set into a siege of Richmond, which would last 9 months. Left in control of the west, William Sherman would start his march to the sea. He would take multiple cities and hit the Confederates' crumbling war effort, and also their citizens. Lee, growing desperate, would go on his last offensive when he tried to take the federally controlled Fort Stedman. He was pushed back after a counterattack, and soon afterwards, Lee's men would be pushed out of Richmond. Lee would be on the run for a few more days before surrendering. On April 14, 1865, in Ford's Theater, Abraham Lincoln would be assassinated by slightly well-known actor John Wilkes Booth, who just 12 days later would get surrounded by Union troops and shot to death in a barn. That same day, Johnston would surrender, ending the war for most Confederates. Confederate resistance would continue in Texas for another 16 months, officially ending in 1866. Thus ended the deadliest war that occurred on American soil. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you had, please remember to like and subscribe. And if you hadn't, go ahead and dislike and tell me why in the comments. I'll see you guys all in the next one. Goodbye.